having a better week than last week, and it's gonna continue to get better. I hope. And so, that being said, I wanna just kind of talk to you guys about what we're gonna do this week, and then kind of talk about the next couple weeks briefly so that we're on the same page. And so this week, I'm going to go ahead and jump into signing your informative speech just so you can get your mind thinking. You'll get pick your topics next week, but I'll assign that, everything that goes into it, the speech, the outline, the template, the rubric, how to cite sources, all of that. And then we'll go over a quick lesson on audience analysis and do a little activity. And that's pretty much it for this week. Next week, we're gonna have 2 informative activities that focus on 2 different aspects of the chapters. We'll go over informative speaking and sources. And then the next week, so 2 weeks from today, will be when your outlines are due, so it'll be your workshop. Then the next week, 3 weeks from today, will be when your speeches are. And then the next week, we won't have class because I have a conference I'm gonna speak at out of state. And so you guys won't have a class, we'll just have an out of class activity that I'll email you guys about. And then we're into mid-October and so there's no need to go that far yet. And so that's kind of where we're at. And so I wanna go ahead and jump in a little bit. We're gonna talk a little bit about, obviously informative speaking. I wanna talk about that before I go over our speech because, I hate this remote, I don't know that, okay. Because with informative speaking, it's just hard. It's hard to give a powerful and strong informative speech because they're often really boring, right? And your job as a speaker is to make your audience not bored. And so that being said, with speaking in general, but especially in an informative manner, your job is to captivate your audience, but you've got to make sure that you are staying informative. So that means no opinion, no persuasion, right? Or opinion that you're not basing on people. You can say your experience, but not trying to persuade or saying it's the most beautiful because someone else might say this is the most beautiful or the best basketball player of all time. Because to you that's someone, to someone else it's someone else, okay? And so you want to be mindful about that with informative speaking, but just because you have to speak with facts doesn't mean you can't have fun with it and show your personality and all of that fun stuff. And so that's what we're gonna learn how to do today, is figure out how to make our words come to life, and next week mainly, and take away that stigma of informative speaking being boring and showcasing your personality through it. Okay, so let's get into what your speech in a couple of weeks will be on, okay? And so let me zoom this in. I'm gonna potentially have to change this, most likely actually, since we still have, no one's dropped the class yet, which is great. But that also means that sometimes I have to play with the times to make sure that we can get all, 23 in here. Whether 23 are always here or not, that's how many we still have enrolled. And so this might have to change to 3 to 4. That's what I had to change my U of A classes to, but we'll get to that closer to time. And so that being said, this one is a 150-point speech. It's 15% of your grade. And so each speech kind of goes up by 50 points. And so your next one will be 200, so on. But in this informative speech, you're going to pick any country in the world besides the United States, and you're going to research it, okay? And you are going to teach us about it, but in a purely informative manner. And so when you're thinking of a country, if there's one that you're thinking, oh my gosh, I love this country, my family goes all the time, it's the best, blah, 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 you might might not want to choose that one because that one might be hard for you to not be opinionated, because you might easily, out of just the silence or trying to figure out what to say next, you might go to opinion and persuasion. But if you think you can avoid that and you just are knowledgeable on it, then I say whatever you want. You can decide. But I am also okay with islands. There's almost 200 countries, but there's thousands of islands. However, you don't want to choose an island that is super remote, that you went to once on a trip and then they took you to this teeny tiny island that no one's really heard of, because you're not going to find research that has been on the library database or Google Scholar on it, which is a huge part of this assignment. And so that is big, you having enough content, which we'll go over here shortly. Okay, and so here's where the bulk of your content will be. You're gonna have 3 main points with your speech, okay? You get to decide what those 3 main points are, and most of y'all's will look really different. So for instance, if you have visited this country before, you could tell for one of your main points your experience, what you did there. You could tell, some tourist things or what you ate or whatever. I had someone that went to one country and she told a story. She kind of made one of her points on like crime and corruption, but she told a personal story when she was there, how she was in an Uber trying to get back from the airport to her resort, and the Uber started taking her somewhere that was not her resort, and she told this story, and it happened to her, and it was informative, and it held everyone's attention. But you may not have a country that you've visited for that you choose, and that's okay. That's just one example that you could choose if you have a story that you want to include or experience, as long as you're not saying, I went here, it was amazing, you gotta go, because that is not an informative speech. Now, you could also decide that you want to talk about the wildlife in this country, maybe the food, maybe something specific with the government, specific with the history, with culture. I had someone that did Canada, and they had one of their main points being they talked about Justin Bieber being from there. They talked about Drake. They had kind of it broken down like that for the relatability aspect of things that, we think of. I had someone else that talked about stereotypes. Let's stay on Canada, and it could be, maple syrup, could be hockey, and then talking about within that, let's dive deeper into maple syrup. Let's talk about it within Canada. Let's dive deeper with hockey, and then so on and so forth. And that is great too. Okay, but you decide things that are exciting to you that you can research, because if you're excited about it, we will be too. I just encourage you not to be really broad. Don't say, okay, I'm gonna do Russia. One of my facts or main points is gonna be history. Because this is a 3 to 5 or 3 to 4 minute speech. You can't do one of your points, the history of the country, because it's just not attainable. That would have to be a really, really long speech, and the whole speech, not just one aspect. So you'd have to dive deep into something specific regarding history. Okay, but you get to have fun with it. And my biggest piece of advice is don't pick your main points until you found your sources, because you're probably not going to be able to find exactly what you want, since it's scholarly and academic, Google Scholar, NWAC Library Database. Whereas if you were just to Google, you could say, tell me about wildlife in Kenya, and it's going to tell you, whereas the academic, scholarly, NWAC Library, Google Scholar, all of that, you might have to be a little bit more, okay, let's look up wildlife in Kenya, see what pops up. Maybe not exactly what I thought popped up. Maybe instead the big 5 pops up in wildlife, and instead I change my topic to cater to the sources that I find. Okay, and so be open to that, because a lot of times students get frustrated and they aren't able to find exactly the type of sources that they want to match the specific main points that they want to do. Okay, And so you'll pick 3 main points. All of y'all will likely look different. Some will overlap. Just pick something you care about, okay? And so with your speech, obviously, it must be informative, not persuasive. That sounds so easy, but it ends up being really hard for students, not including those opinionated words, because that's just what we do whenever our mind shuts down for a second. We just say, it's amazing, you gotta go there, etc. And so you've gotta avoid that. So stay informative. Everything you say needs to be backed up by facts, okay? And then your speech must have an intro, body, conclusion, of course. And then here's the big one, has to be verified through citation. You're required to have a minimum of 3 credible sources. So that means ideally from NWAC Library Database or Google Scholar, which I'm gonna walk you through how to use those at the end of this. And so one of those has to be from the library database at NWAC though, but if you have 3 sources, and you could have all 3 of them from the NWAC Library Database, or you could have one from NWAC Library Database and the other 2 from Google Scholar, and that's fine too. I try to avoid Google unless you absolutely can't find anything. You've looked, and then you can find one that's a .org, a .gov, a .edu, but it's not gonna cite it for you. So my rule of thumb is Library Database, Google Scholar, and then if you're just really struggling, talk to me and I'll try to help you. Okay, and so you will have to orally cite and do written citation, which we will go over as well. But if you have 3 sources, you have to cite them in APA, 3, so each one time, and then you'll have to orally cite each one time. This is different than a research paper in the fact of, in-text citations, you may do the same source over and over and over. You don't have to do that in public speaking. You just have to cite each source one time, and that is fine. And I'll, again, show you an example of that. And so, library.nwac.edu is the website. I'll show you a tutorial here in a minute, but that's where you'll find that, and then Google Scholar for the others. And then, as with all speeches, it's extemporaneous. Someone tell me the definition. Prepared but not memorized. Thank you. Which is a lot harder for this speech than it was your last speech, because you can't go off of just your experience. You've got to go off of what you've learned about the country from online. Okay? Again, 3 to 5 minutes or 3 to 4, depending on once I do my math, probably next week, whenever I see exactly who's still in here. And then you've got a 30-second grace period, but if you're over under 30 seconds or more, you'll lose 10%, which is 15 points since it's a 150-point speech. And then on the day you speak, you'll give me 1 note card, front and back, no full sentences. And then I encourage you on that note card to put your sources, because that's the easiest thing to forget, because it doesn't come naturally to orally cite, but we'll get there later. And then you'll also need to have printed out your final draft outline for this speech as well. And then notebook paper, just like you did this last speech. Okay, and so before I go into the grading criteria and details on the outline and example and all that, do y'all have any questions? Okay. So now I am going to go over, let me go over the example outline of a former student right now. And so this will answer some of the things that I'm grading that are different too. And so this is a former student that did theirs on Turks and Caicos. So they did the island of Turks and Caicos. For her intro and attention getter, before she starts speaking, she, not required, but she had a picture of the island behind her, and then she had low music playing. And so, that being said, she did not keep the music playing the whole time, which is, please don't have music playing the whole time of your speech. But if you do it at the beginning or a little clip or something, that can be great. Okay, but it tends to be really distracting if you try to play something the whole time. You can see where the speakers are, and one is right over where I sit, and I normally am like, I can only hear this music, I can't hear your voice. And so then she goes into her attention getter. Remember, this is a hook, first thing that you say. And so she said, it is 2020, you are a senior in high school planning a senior trip with your two best friends. You then hear a click, and it is the most exciting sound that you have heard in a while. It's then followed by a bunch of high-pitched screams jumping up and down. You just booked your cruise to Turks and Caicos. Okay, what I would not want you to do is, again, hi guys, my name's Cambry. I'm gonna talk to you about Turks and Caicos, okay? Or, you know, this is my country speech. Because then I'm gonna be like in the back going, I'm just kidding. I won't be like that crazy, but I will say that is not an attention getter. So you gotta hook us in right away. And then we go into your ethos statement. Before I show you what that is, does anyone know what ethos means in a research speech? Ethos. Another word for ethos might be, and it starts with a C.
Credibility.
Yeah, credibility. Your credibility statement. So why we should trust you, okay? Every good informative speech has to have this because it tells the audience why you're reliable, okay? I do this on the first day of class when I introduce myself. I say, hi guys, my name is Ms. Bartosik. I have taught public speaking for the last, 10 years, blah, blah, blah. I love it. I have a passion for it, so on. If I were to come in here and said, hi guys, who here has a fear of public speaking? And you raise your hand and you're like, me too. And I'm saying, we're gonna get through this together because I have not overcome it. You're gonna be like, why the heck are you teaching this class, right? Why are you here? Instead, I say, I got my master's in this, my undergrad in this, I've been teaching this long, so on and so forth, so that you trust the speaker, okay? So for this ethos statement or credibility statement, she says, despite COVID causing my trip to get canceled, the amount of time I've spent planning and researching about this British colony is astronomical, okay? So it could be, obviously all of y'all are gonna research, so that's one part that you automatically have for your credibility. Maybe if you've been there, you can add that. If you've, some people have family that live in this country you can talk to. Some people have had, foreign exchange students stay with their family where they've gotten to learn about countries, so on and so forth. But you tell us what makes you credible to speak on this country more than anyone else, okay? And then you're gonna have a relevant statement. Before I scroll down to show you what that means, I want you to know that this is something that a lot of students also mix up. Relevant statement is relating your country to your audience. You're not telling us why your country is related to you. You're not saying, I've traveled here a lot, I love this place, I have family here. No, it's not about you, it's about your audience, which is a big part of what we're gonna talk about today, is audience, audience, audience. That's how you keep people's attention, is by making them feel connected to your content. So how does a random person sitting in your seat have a connection to this random country that they have probably never been to before, may never go to before? So it's your job to link it right there. And so for her, she did, does anyone know the population of Turks and Caicos? She lets her classmate answer this. She tells him the answer prior. He says about 30,000. She says correct. And then we have our first oral citation. And she said, according to census.gov, the United States, relatability, has about 11,085 times Turks and Caicos population. So that's one way you can relate. You could also say, in just a 4,687 mile trip, you too could be in the capital of, Colombia. Or at that many miles is where the capital of Colombia is, from right here in Burns Hall. Okay, so you're relating to your audience somehow. That is to your audience, not to yourself. And then you give a quick preview. Turks and Caicos has been known for their considerable amount of tourism, unique government system, and rich history. So now we know that the 3 points that they chose are tourism, government, history, okay? And so pretty self-explanatory. Then a transition. Any good speech has fluid transitions, meaning you don't really know it's a transition. You don't know that you're going from one point to the other, just like the Joplin tornado example. Fluid. You don't want to say, now I'm going to talk about government, or now I'm going to talk about this, okay, or tourism. Instead, with either a 5-hour, 45-minute flight from Exenay to Providenciales or a quick 4-day Carnival cruise, you too could, not should, be a tourist on the island for spring break, okay? And so that tells you now we're going to talk about tourism, right? Instead of saying, now let's talk about tourism. You got it. Now we're going to go tourism, detail, detail, detail. On your template that I have for you guys, I have this third point as optional, which is definitely, you're probably just going to want to do too to make time. Since we do still have so many students in this class, but I just didn't want to delete it because it has good examples for you if you are trying to figure out things to say for your own speech. But make sure you are using all of your own words, of course. And then transition to the second main point. And then we're transitioning to the third main point, details, details. And then we're going to transition to the conclusion. The islands hold many historical significance. It has been through the times of the settlers, the wars, was involved in the Treaty of Versailles, and now is known as the fastest growing economies in the Caribbean. Okay, then we got our conclusion. You do a quick review of your points. Now you know how the island's tourism is important. This might flag in my head as potentially persuasive or opinionated, but I'll let it slide right now. How their government system works and how the island came about. Then a quick tie back to the attention getter. You too could enjoy the sound of click, which was the attention getter. Thank you, so an obvious conclusion here so we know when to clap. Okay, now I'm gonna quiz you guys a little bit. Here's the works cited page. And so I want you to look at it and see there's some things that are wrong with it. And so I kept it wrong here so that you guys can try to tell me there's at least 3 things that are wrong. Someone tell me one thing that's wrong with the works cited page.
Should it be on its own page?
Yeah, it's its own works cited page. So this should absolutely be tab, 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 down on its own page. What else? Can y'all see anything else?
Does it need to say works cited instead of sources at the top?
I'm not picky about that, but yeah, that would be totally fine. Say it louder.
Alphabetical order.
Yeah, alphabetical order by the author or by the first word that's on here. And so it should be Cameron first, then car, then government, etc. So it should be in alphabetical order. And there's at least one more. Does anyone have a guess?
Isn't the title of the page or the article, is it supposed to be italicized?
Maybe in a real English class, it wouldn't bother me. But I'm going to highlight has to do with the beginning of these lines. Does anyone have an
they're
idea?
not tabbed
Yeah.
in.
What would that be called?
Hanging indent.
And what kind of indent? Did you
Hanging.
say it?
Oh, I don't know what that did.
Who did?
Hanging.
Hanging indent. So tell us what that would mean. What would that mean for this source right here?
The line after the first line should be tabbed over.
And what about this line?
Which line?
The third line.
Isn't that one tabbed over as well?
Yes. So any line after the top line is tabbed over. So you've got car, normal, far to the left, then lines 2 and 3, tabbed over. This one on population stays where it is. The link, tabbed over. Tours and excursions stay right there, but lines 2 and 3, tabbed over, stay here. This word and sentence, tabbed over. This stays here. This line, tabbed over. Okay, so yes, it's called a hanging indent. We do APA 7th edition in here, or APA for Google Scholar is fine. I'm not picky on sometimes, depending on if you're using NWAC or Google Scholar, sometimes depending on the source, it'll sometimes copy the hyperlink and sometimes it won't. I'm not gonna be picky about that. If we were in an English comp class or a higher, class focusing on papers and all of that, I would be more, caring about that, but we focus more on the words and the content, and so as long as we got the basics, that is fine with me. And so, yes, so this needs to be on its own page, alphabetical order, hanging indent. And so, good. The other thing I am kind of weird about, just because it's a visual thing, is making sure that the fonts are all the same, okay? Especially with how prevalent just cheating in chat and all of that stuff is. Even when you copy the source from the NWAC library database or whatever, just at the end, make sure it's all on the same, because it looks sketchy if it's not. Yes.
And you said it was APA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. APA, if you have the ability to do the addition, it's 7th, okay? And so, that being said, I'm gonna walk you guys through how to use the library database. You won't need it for today, but we will for next week, our activities. And so, has anyone used or familiar with the NWAC library database? We have a couple. And so, majority of us don't, which is totally fine. And so just make sure you're watching so you don't get confused, because I'm gonna show you how to use the library database and Google Scholar to find it. And so everyone just, stop what you're doing if you're playing on your computers and look up here, because this will be the only time we go over this, okay? And so you're gonna go to library.nwac.edu, okay? Now, here. We're not gonna go super advanced here because we don't need to right now. If you were doing higher level stuff, then you would go to advanced search, but it would just be more confusing than anything right now. Okay, so what you're gonna do is whenever you've decided what country you wanna do, you're gonna play around. And that is super important that you allow yourself the ability to play around, okay? Research is really important, that you do not feel like it's the same as Google. Google is got so much stuff that is navigated to you that it's gonna, make the first and second pages definitely more catered to you. But these scholarly sites aren't necessarily like that. You might have to dig 5-10 pages down and you're still gonna find something really good. And so don't feel like you have to go to just the first page, because in grad school, I hardly found what I was looking for. Granted, it was a lot more specific on that first page. So allow yourself to dig in and look through a lot of articles, okay? And don't pick totally your website or your main point until you find your source that can back it up. I had someone in an earlier class today that they wanted to do Brazil, and they were really looking for something specific, and they just couldn't find it. They could find articles that talked a little bit about it, but not what they wanted. And so I said, be open to reading an article and then deciding, oh, maybe I'll talk about this instead, because that's really important and gonna help you a lot with your headaches, okay? And so let's say that my country is Kenya, and I wanna maybe talk about the wildlife for one of my topics, okay? I'm gonna do Kenya wildlife, so country, main point potential. Now I'm gonna search. Search. Okay. And it'll probably have you log in, so just keep that in mind. You're not gonna get everything if you're not logged in, so let's go ahead and do that. You want to make sure that online full text is highlighted, because that'll give you the full article, okay? And so now you can see that I have over 64,000 articles that popped up. Does that mean they're all what I want? Absolutely not, okay? So this is wildlife services. This talks about deaf community backs Kenya wildlife service plans, blah, 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 blah. Ant smugglers, no thank you. Okay, there's a lot of stuff. Possibly, no, let's look at more. Okay, no, but, well, maybe. Okay, this could be interesting. Maybe I want to change mine to Kenya Kenya wildfires and how that affected wildlife. That's something that interests me, so if it interests me, it'll probably interest them. Okay, so let's see if I have full text. There's a good chance, even though I clicked full text, I might still only have access to the abstract. Sometimes you can find enough in the abstract, but sometimes you can't. If you can't, get out of it, find a new article because there's 64,000 others, okay? Let's see what we can find here. Click. Like I said, it's a lot of trial and error. Okay, do. I don't see what I want here, so let me see. Sometimes you can click these extra things, but I don't want to for the sake of this example. But I do see access now. Let's see if that will help. You're looking for full text, access now, PDF. Okay, could not be found. That means it's been deleted. Next. Okay, so let's keep looking. Do. That talks about Kenya wildfires too, to protect coral reefs. That would be really specific, but I might be interested in it because it would just be one of my main points. Elephant conflict. I could make mine about the elephant conflict, but I don't think I want to yet because I'm not there yet. Okay, moving on. Let's find one that we like. No. Maybe. Okay, this interests me. Let's see. Access now. Let's see if this works. And if not, we're gonna keep looking because that's the fun of it. I don't know if it's fun for you guys, but it's fun for me to get to see what's gonna work. You can see some of these have sub-websites, and you can click sub-websites too. Because it's on here, it's still considered academic, or they wouldn't have put it. So we can click it just for fun, but I still wanna keep looking. And so the point of this is to show you guys how to dig. And that is important for us not to just go to the first one. This one brings me to a real website, which is fine. It's just you're not gonna have as much content. And so you could still do it, but I wanna keep looking. Okay, do. Let's just go a little faster and I'll find something that I'm not gonna be as picky on. Okay, no. Okay, let's see about this one. Scroll. This one's a newspaper, so let's see. So we can see the description. You always want to read that. It's not giving me more there, which is fine. Access. Here we go. So we have a longer one, the article that we can look at. And so let's say that I've read through this. I'm like, ooh, there's some good info. I want to know how to cite this, okay? You can always see at the top if there's this button, but when in doubt, because not all websites look the same, so everyone look up here, look up here, look up here. Okay, when in doubt, when there's not this sign right here, I want you to go back to where you originally clicked. The article, so let's just say this one. Always look for these 3 dots in the upper right hand corner. Click cite. Okay, if I want to do this one, click 3 dots, cite. If I want to do this one, click the 3 dots, cite. Now, once I click cite, let's look what that looks like. Okay, I've got it already clicked on APA 7th edition, and it cites it for me. So I'm just going to copy this, and then paste on my works cited page. Okay, if I want to do another one, go back. I'll just always look for these 3 dots. Cite, APA 7th, make sure it's on that. Copy. Now I have another one. Okay, but don't do it until you find the article you want. But it's super easy. I always tell my students, just go back, click those 3 dots, because sometimes when you click on the article, it's not necessarily up here. And so this one is, but especially when we get to other ones, man, this is faster than normal. It might not be there. So if you ever question on the library database where to find it, go back to where you originally clicked it, 3 dots, cite. okay? But now, I'm not finding what I want, okay? I want something a little bit, that's gonna give me more content. So I'm gonna go to Google Scholar. It's actually scholar.google.com. And so I'm gonna go here. If you have an NWAC email, you have access to this, okay? And so, very different than Google, and you'll see, but all of these are credible for our class. So now I wanna do Kenya, let's do political corruption. Okay, so I wanna do this because I have a story that I can talk about this whenever I was there. So now I'm looking, look, there's over 500,000 results that popped up. We're not gonna go through all of those, obviously, but here's one exactly kind of the title I'm looking for, okay? So look here, corruption in Kenya. Let's see if we have access to the full text, okay? Accept all. Here's the abstract. So no full text unless we can find something up here that allows us, and it doesn't look like, well, we can see it without paying. There might be enough here, but if not, moving on. Is this one the same one? No, it's by a different author. So let's click. I'm thinking that it's gonna be better because look right here, it says PDF. This one says full text. The one we clicked on had nothing, okay? And so keep that in mind when you're clicking on things. Let's see. Corruption in Kenya. Okay, this is just a shorter article, but it does have more. And so maybe I want that. If I do, again, just like we did library database, look up here, go back, look for that same symbol. Quotation mark, click cite, APA. It's okay that it's not 7th because you guys will do the hanging indent yourself. Copy, good. I like this one, cite. Okay, I like this one, cite. And so, super easy, you just have to do some digging with the articles you choose, okay? And so, that's not so bad, is it? No, okay, I have some that are like, but yes.
And we're not limited to 3, it's just the minimum of 3?
Exactly. Minimum of 3, one has to be from NWAC. But yeah, if you have 5 sources, then you'll orally cite 5 times and you'll have 5 sources on your works cited page. Now, here's where it gets important for you guys to kind of focus. Oral citations can be confusing for everyone, okay? I'm not gonna lie, I've never liked them, but it's just kind of part of research. And so in grad school, I had to do this all the time. Now, every professor is different, but my rule of thumb for citing is if you can cite orally by the article name, do that. Okay, only cite the author's name if they are someone of significance. A doctor, a lawyer, a professor, someone well known in their field. But if you just cite according to, Joe Johnson, I'll be like, who the heck is Joe Johnson? It could be your uncle from Nevada, okay? That doesn't equal significance. And so instead, you'll cite, according to an article from, called Beyond Sun, Sand, and Sea, or let's see, according to the government of Turks and Caicos Islands, okay, you ideally, except for this census.gov one, I would never cite the website itself because if it's not something really that has credibility behind it, like census.gov, there's no reason for you to do it. I've also had someone that has said, according to EBSCOhost, or according to ProQuest, that's the exact same thing as saying according to Google. Okay, that's the search engine, don't say that. So say the article name or the author only if there's someone of significance. So according to Dr. Johansson, professor at Cambridge University, we learned blah, 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 blah. Then you would do the author. So you only do the author if you tell us who they are. They're a professor at this university, they're a doctor in this field, they're a biochemist, okay? But if they're not, or according to scientists, blah, blah, okay? But if not, most of the times you'll just do the article name. Now, what if the article name is this long, right? Do I want you to cite the entire name orally? No, I don't, okay? then as long as you're saying enough so that I know which article you're talking to, you know, an article about does governance influence community support tells us blah, blah, blah. I'm just gonna shorten it because I can look at your works cited page and say, according to an article, government influence, check. I know exactly what you're talking about when you say it. But you don't wanna say this whole thing because one, it's gonna take up half your note card. Or two, you're gonna be really struggling to remember it. And then three, it's just really long and there's no need, okay? And so, cite by the article name, unless it's a website of, you know, census.gov that's really popular or known, or the author only if there's someone with credibility behind their name. Questions about that? Questions about library or Google Scholar or sources? Remember, if you have the three required sources, orally cite 3 times, cite on your works cited page 3 sources. If you have 4 times orally, 4 sources. 5 times orally, 5 sources. But only once per source is totally fine. Okay? Questions? So next week, y'all are gonna need to come to class with what country you wanna do. And I'll put a piece of paper around and you'll sign up for your country. You need to have your top 3 countries picked, because if I give it to you first and you pick Italy and you're thinking, I wanted Italy, you need to go to your second choice, okay? And so keep that in mind. But remember, you can't go wrong. I had someone in my class today that wanted Australia so bad, which I'm fine with Australia. And so he was like, I don't know, all I was thinking about today was Australia, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, let's figure out something else you can be excited about. He's like, that's the only place I really wanted to go. And I'm like, well, let's pick somewhere that you just care about. And he decided that he would have fun learning about North Korea. And I'm like, I would love to learn about North Korea. You can tell us a ton. It might scare us, but that might be fun too. And so you can have some fun with things you care about as well, picking things that you wouldn't expect, okay? Someone did Indonesia today, and that was really exciting because we were talking about, you know, these volcanoes, and we were talking about all of this wildlife and creatures that we have never heard of here. And so that was really fun too. And so just give yourself some freedom outside of the Italy, Canada, Mexico. If you want to do those are fine. But I'm just saying, let yourself research some too and have fun with it. Okay. That being said, before I move on, has anyone thought of a question now? Man, we are tired today, huh? Okay, that's okay. It's week 5. Isn't that crazy that it's week 5? It's wild. And so, that being said, I want to move on to what we're actually going to talk about today. Let me bring up my notes. And so our activity that I want to, or kind of lesson, is going to be on audience analysis. We talked about that a little bit with you're relating your country to your audience. You're relating your country to anyone that's not just you, okay? And so that goes hand in hand with every speech that you're ever going to have to do relating to your audience. And so audience analysis is really important, and it's kind of broken down into a couple things, but first I want to talk about who, okay? And so you would talk differently to, I'm sure, a parent than you would a sibling. You would talk differently to a coworker than you would your boss. You talk differently, I'm sure, to me than you would a classmate. You talk differently to your friend than a best friend, a sibling than you would your aunt. All of these things are important to know and change the way you talk that's going to be most beneficial to your audience itself. For instance, if I'm up here and I am planning to come into class and I'm planning to talk to a bunch of college students and introduce myself and tell you guys about myself, but instead it turns out to be, an elementary school class and the wires just got changed, what's something that I'm probably going to have to change about the way I speak based on my audience members going from college students to elementary school people? What's something I'm gonna have to change? What do you mean?
Like, kinda appropriate for our age.
Yeah, definitely language. There's things that even saying, you know, dang it, or whatever, then they're gonna repeat it and they're gonna take it home, right? Whereas I can say it to you guys and you would be like, well, what? You know, that you just think nothing. And so language, the words you say. Also on language, what's something else?
Tone?
Tone of voice, absolutely. I can be a lot more, you know, myself and just more level to level with you guys. Whereas, you know, sometimes you change the way you talk and the, you know, tone of voice and all of that to a bunch of, you know, potentially 8-year-olds or 6-year-olds. It's gonna be really different. Same thing with level, right? If I'm talking to you guys right here, I'm gonna have a bunch of elementary school kids. They're not gonna all be looking at me. And I'm gonna say, okay guys, look up here. No shot. Are a bunch of, you know, however old, gonna just listen to what I say. I'm gonna have to be creative with how I keep their attention. So if it's a kindergarten class, I might say, okay guys, let's all circle up and let's sit in a circle right here. And then I'm not going to be standing right here with them. Instead, I'm gonna go down to their level, right? I'm gonna get here, oh, my shoe fell off. I'm gonna sit down and be like, okay, do. I'm at their level, I'm not looking down, okay? So that is important. Let's see, something else would be, like I said, friend different than best friends. I'm sure we can all picture our friends that we have that are, you know, close. We talk to them, but then we have our best friend. Our friend comes in the room. This is, I guess, mainly probably towards girls right here with this example maybe, but says, hey, I'm going, you know, to this dinner tonight, blah, blah, blah. Should I wear this? Your friend comes, like, absolutely, you look great. Your best friend comes in, you're like, turn around right now. You are not going out like that. You can't say that to your friend because they're gonna be like, that is so rude. But your best friend is like, oh, fine, right? You change who your audience is. Same with siblings. I could say that to my sister, but if I said that to, you know, my cousin, they'd be like, that is so rude. And I wouldn't, because that would hurt my feelings too. Same thing with age, okay? We wanna also be mindful about stereotypes as well. And so let's think, I think I've talked to you guys about my grandma before. She passed last year, but she was 102 and a half when she passed. She lived by herself until she was 100. She drove until she was 98. She was amazing in every way. And you would see her information on paper, for instance, when you go to the hospital, and the doctors would always come in and they would get really close and they'd be like, hi, how are you? And my grandma would be like, fine, why are you yelling at me? Because she wasn't, you know, she still had her hearing, but they just assumed, they're like, you were born in, you know, 1921, how the heck are you gonna, so they just do that. You don't wanna assume those things. Instead, you want to speak as you normally would, and then if you notice cues, them kind of leaning forward, or saying what, or looking confused, or if you say a joke and there's no response, then you know, okay, maybe I'll get a little closer, maybe I'll speak up. You change the way you speak based on how your audience is and based on how they react. I change how I speak all throughout the day. My 8 a.m., woof. I kind of know not to make jokes in that class because they're not ready for it. They just need coffee. I'm gonna tell a joke, I'm gonna get so many straight faces. Then my 12:30 class, they're more into it. They're a little bit more excited. They want to chat a bit more, okay? You guys are, I'm just kidding. I was gonna make a joke. But you guys are similar in the fact that, yeah, we're tired, it's been a long day, but I still know I'm probably gonna get more verbal responses. If I'm gonna ask for a volunteer, I'm probably gonna get one without having I didn't say you, without having to force, but if I do, it's okay. And then we end up opening up and so on. Okay, and so that being said, I want to always think, hey, do I have enough information coming into this setting to know who I'm talking to? How do I address? And if there is a situation, I might have to pivot, and am I ready for that? And you always need to be ready for the unforeseen circumstances that we'll get to in a second. I've also had situations where I've had to, you know, we're here, we're in Arkansas, a lot of us say y'all, we say things like that. I've interviewed for a job through, it was online, but it's still in New Hampshire, and I say y'all, and I get these looks thinking, oh geez, you hick, or you hillbilly, right? And so then I kind of see, and I pivot a little bit, you all, you guys, that kind of thing, based on where we're located. Sometimes that is okay and taken well, sometimes it's not, and I have to pivot, and that is okay. It happens, and that's okay. Okay, but here's where I want to transition a little bit. We've talked about who, but now I want to talk about where. Okay, so let's say that last week you guys are coming to class, it's speech day, you're ready to go, but then I say, hey guys, change your plans, we're gonna go, it's a beautiful evening, let's go outside and give your speeches. What are some things that could go wrong if you're prepped for this little classroom and instead we go out to that grass right there? What's something that could go wrong?
Sun might be in your eyes.
Cars, sun, cars meaning loud, right? You're gonna have to speak up louder than you think. Sun could be in your eyes, you're gonna struggle with the eye contact, and you might not be able to see your note card as well, right? But mosquitoes, yeah. You might be itching yourself. What else? What else could go wrong?
Just the change in venue could,
Yeah, you're prepared for this setting, totally changes. You've got people walking by, you've got cars driving by, there's a lot more distractions that are gonna get you away from your note card that you've practiced when you've been alone in your car. And so that is huge. I used to do this activity outside at the U of A in the Greek Theater, and it was perfect for that, but it was so distracting, and that proved the point where, you know, people would have their friends or someone in another class walk by, and you would think that their friend had never seen them outside ever, because they were doing everything they could to get their attention. Hey, you know, and I'm thinking, you literally, I just saw you guys walk in together 10 minutes ago. Why are you like this? And then, you know, they're trying to think or not laugh or whatever. And so that is huge. Obviously wind, right? Wind happens, it blows your note card away, it blows your peer critiques away, your audience is distracted. That is something as well. Now, let's say that I get an email and this room is locked, okay? The people have gone home, we don't have access to this room, now we have to go to an auditorium, okay? A larger auditorium, still inside, but it's it's an auditorium, it's leveled up. What's something that you might need in an auditorium that you wouldn't have here? Louder voice or a microphone, right? If you're someone who speaks quietly, how the heck are you gonna talk to the people in the back row without that? And so that is something really, really big. You also wanna be mindful that there's probably gonna be people that are zoning out a little bit more. Back row normally does that, and so you wanna be mindful about that too. And then, do you have a podium, right? If you're prepared for a podium but don't have it, and then you have all of this stuff, and you're trying to, you know, go through your notes and blah, 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 but there's nowhere to set it, and then you need this in one hand and so on, that's gonna mess you up, so that's a good question that you wanna have as well. Projector, that's the biggest thing that I've noticed, and why I don't use it very often for y'all to have for your speeches is because it normally, students try to take the place of notes with the projector behind them, and that it tells them, okay, I'm gonna talk about this, click. Next, I'm gonna talk about this. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about this. so on and so forth. And if you're planning to have a projector that tells you what to say, and then you get to this place and there's no projector, you don't want that to let you totally freak out and freeze, because that's what your notes were on. So you gotta ask questions there. Okay, and then also, whenever I've taught bigger classes, I know with y'all, I can ask questions like this. I can say, what could go wrong? And y'all are gonna answer me, okay? If I'm in an auditorium, I might have the front row that'll respond to me, but if there's 200 people in there, I'm gonna have a lot less people to respond to me, because there's a lot more judgmental eyes, right? And so you need to be prepared for that. How many people are gonna be there? Is the amount of people gonna frustrate you? Is it gonna mess up how you're gonna give your presentation, so on and so forth, okay? And so those are just some things that could go wrong, could go right, but we need to be prepared for, and the ability to pivot and transition, okay? And so how does this have anything to do with what we're gonna do today? I'm gonna divide you guys up into groups in just a second. With your groups, you are going to get different scenarios, and you are going to have to come up, based on who your audience is, on little motivational talks to those audiences. The audiences will dictate how you kind of go into your motivational speech, okay? And so, let me unmute this. Okay, and so you guys will be able to see it in a second, but I'm gonna give you guys some time. Here is what you and your classmates and your group are gonna do. I'll divide you up in a second, okay? And so you're gonna write a script to the following groups of people on the same topic, which I'll tell you in a second, but changing your word choice based on who would be most effective and relatable to each different demographic audience, okay? Here's the topic that you have for all audiences, and you're all gonna do each of these, okay? So the topic is, you just had a really hard, rough day, and you are asked to give a quick motivational pep talk to liven the room. The first audience you're gonna do this to, 3 to 5 sentences, is gonna be a group of coworkers at a large business. You decide what happened to make that day bad, okay? And you decide who you are. Are you a fellow coworker? Are you the boss? Okay, are you the CEO? Who are you, a manager? Who are you? Okay, number 2, your softball, baseball, any sport team. You just had a really rough day. Maybe you lost the state championship game. Maybe your star goalie broke his arm, okay? And then maybe you're the coach, maybe you're the captain, maybe you're the water boy, and you're giving a motivational talk to them to liven them up after their rough day, whatever it is. And then an elementary school class, okay? Doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it's as simple as rain happening at recess, okay, and not getting to go outside. Maybe you're the teacher, maybe you're a principal, maybe you're another student trying to help everyone feel better, okay? And so here's where it gets kind of fun. You've got to use personality and motivation to help this, okay? And so for example, yes, this is corny, but you just got to, okay? And so for this one, I might say, team, I know it, and you are going to add emotional aspects to this, which I'll say in a second. I know it's been one heck of a year. We went 11-0 all season, all caps, because you're gonna really enunciate that until today. Losing in the state championship game is hard, but we can leave with our heads held high because we had an undefeated season and we never gave up. Yes, it's okay to be bummed, but don't be disappointed because we played one heck of a game today. This loss today is only gonna make us even stronger for when we come back next year, okay? So, you change it based on your audience, but you want them to feel like they can run through a brick wall. They're so excited, okay? So you and your group mates are gonna do this for all 3 of them. I'm gonna count to see how many people we have in here and then divide you up. But whenever I divide you up, you're all gonna do this together on a sheet of paper. You're all gonna work. So for instance, let's say that y'all 3 are a group. Okay, you'll get a sheet of paper. You might get out the sheet of paper and you might write the first scenario, but I don't want you to write it and y'all two to be quiet, okay? I want instead for y'all to be saying, you maybe say, okay, let's start by saying this. You write that sentence, and then you say, okay, next we should say this. You write that sentence, so on and so forth. And so you've all collaborated. Then you'll give the sheet of paper to you, and then you two will help. Okay, we could say this and this. You're still helping, but you're the writer. And then the third scenario, you would do it, so on and so forth, okay? Then, after the 25 minutes that I give you guys, then I'm gonna say, okay, time is up. I'm gonna put the scenarios on the board, and then whoever wants to go first, let's say that I have 6 groups total. I don't know how many we have yet, but let's say I have 6 groups total. Then whichever group wants to go first, I'll say, okay, which one do you wanna do? And if you say, we're gonna do audience 1, I'm gonna put a tally by audience 1, okay? And let's say we have 6 groups. That means that each audience can only be chosen twice. So if my second group goes, and y'all say, we also wanna do audience 1, I'm gonna put another check by audience 1. Now the groups that go next can only choose to do audience 2 or 3, okay? The next one does 2, then there's still another tally. The next group does 3, then the next group can do 4th one. You get to decide, but then the next group, you only get what's left, okay? And so you're all gonna come up here as a group. You get to decide if you want one person to say your scenario, or if you wanna kinda all do it, but you need to, actually, no, I'm not gonna do it that way. I want everyone to speak because that is the point of this class. And so I did that way in another class, and I decided I don't like it. And so you're all gonna take turns on the sentence, or on the example of, obviously it's this many sentences. And so you might say the first sentence, give the sheet of paper to the second person, they'll say the second sentence, but you're saying it with emotion and passion so that we are motivated, okay? And then you all will just say one of the audience, your motivational speeches. Okay, so let me partner you up. Let me see how many we have first. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10,